Many times people are nervous in an interview and don't pay as close attention as they need to. Then they end up making mistake number 8. Brian was asked, "What kinds of jobs have you had?" He wasn't paying close attention. Here was his response.
I would like to find a job where I can use my skills in desktop publishing.
The interviewer is puzzled by his response, and Brian makes a poor impression. He ends up answering a question he didn't hear or understand. Pay attention to the interviewer's question. Concentrate on the conversation. If you didn't understand or hear a question, ask for clarification. It's better to do that than look foolish. Sometimes people are very concerned about telling every detail. As a result, they give out too much information or the kind that detracts from a good impression. They end up making mistake number 9, telling negative or unsolicited information. Here's what I mean.
What didn't you like about the person you worked for during your summer internship?
He was never around to answer my questions. I had to do everything on my own. I also didn't get much training from Mr. Sands. The project I was supposed to do, it got canceled, so I had to find other things to do.
How do you feel about Brian? You might think if I hire him, he'll be a big complainer, or you may wonder if he lacks self-initiative or is not very assertive, maybe even lazy. Even if it's true that Mr. Sands was not a very good boss, a better response would be,
well, there's nothing in particular I didn't like about Mr. Sands. He was out of town much of the time, and because the project I was initially assigned to was canceled, and I ended up working on the P&A packaging project, I learned how important it was to ask questions. I got good experience in taking the initiative, and I learned the value of research.
It's tempting to give negative information, partly because of the way the question is posed.
What didn't you like about the person you worked for during your summer internship?
And if you're feeling pretty comfortable by now, you may also be tempted to let your hair down and tell the interviewer just how bad it really was working for Mr. Sands. But don't do it. Be on guard. You not only don't want to give negative information, you also don't want to give unsolicited information. For example, when asked,
"What did you like best about your internship?"
Brian said,
well, I liked getting a better understanding of how, after you come up with a design, it gets applied to an actual product. And I love being around creative people all day. I didn't like having to meet with the clients, though. They never knew what they wanted, and they'd say one thing, then change their minds the next time. They were impossible to please.
Ms. Jones didn't ask him what he didn't like, and his answer leaves you with a bad feeling about his experience and ability to deal with clients. He may have opened up a real can of worms. Also, be careful you don't make this mistake, giving the impression you don't care. Here's how you might do that. Many times at the end of the interview, the employer will ask, "Do you have any questions?" Even if all your questions have been answered, don't simply say, "No, I don't have any." Share that they have done a thorough job of answering all of your questions. Then say something like this.
But I'm sure I'll think of a question once I leave. Would it be all right if I call you if I do think of something else?
The other way you show your interest is the way you handle yourself in the last few minutes of the interview. As your conversation is winding down, make sure you summarize your interest in the position and set up the next step.
I'm excited about the position we've talked about and what I've learned about your company. I'd like to continue with the interview process. What's the next step?
The interviewer may not be ready or willing to set up a second interview yet, but at least you've shown your interest. Even if they say they'll call you, ask them if it's okay for you to call them if you haven't heard back by a certain date. Don't forget to write a thank you note. Most people don't write thank you notes. This is your chance to again point out your skills, your personal qualities, and interest in the position. There's one more mistake that people make which can screen you out of the interview process quicker than anything: discussing salary or benefits too soon. What you're going to be paid and how much vacation you get are points that need to be covered, but not yet. If you ask before you get the offer, you're exhibiting that "what can you do for me" attitude we talked about before. Once you get the offer, when you know they want you, then it's time to talk about how much you'll be compensated. Also, if you tell them how much money you want to be paid, you could give a figure that's lower than the position pays. They may think you're too cheap, that you don't see yourself as worthy of what the job pays. On the other hand, if you give a figure that's more than what the position pays, they may decide they can't afford you. They may disqualify you from the running before you've even had a chance to sell yourself. If a company really wants you, they may be willing to pay more to get you. But first, you have to get them to want you. What if they bring up the subject of salary? Say something like this.
Well, I'm interested in learning more about the position at this point. Once we decide there's a good match, then it would make more sense to talk about compensation.
So let's look again at the ways you can overcome common mistakes that could greatly affect your success when interviewing for a job. 1. Instead of believing you have to have all the right answers, look at the interview as a mutual exploration between two people to see if it's a good match. 2. Understand what the employer is looking for. 3. Think through what it is you do best and can do for the company. 4. Show them you understand what business is about, that you're a problem solver, and give examples. 5. Pay close attention to your clothing, how you handle yourself from the minute you walk in the door until the second the meeting is over. And follow up with a thank you note. 6. Ask appropriate questions, organizing your thoughts into a simple formula that helps you tell stories. Here was the situation, here's what I did, here was the result. 7. Give answers that are specific and concrete and supported by stories. 8. Ask for clarification on any questions you don't hear or understand. 9. Listen to the question and think through exactly what you need to share. Make sure you share only positive information. 10. Let the interviewer know you are interested in the job. Keep the lines of communication open and ask to set up the next step. 11. Instead of discussing salary and benefits, let them know you're more interested in making sure you understand the position and that this is a good match. There's no magic formula for getting a job, but these guidelines will greatly improve your chances. If you follow them, you'll be less likely to make these common mistakes in an interview. Before we go, let's see how Brian's doing.
Brian, I'm very impressed with what I've heard today. What I'd like to do is to set up a second interview with Jonathan Lowry, the assistant manager in this department. How does that sound?
Sounds as if Brian is on his way to hearing those 3 magic words. We want you.